Good morning. I hope you guys are doing well today. All right, I want to focus on the brush, and for some of you guys that are starting, I want you to understand that there's actually three basically zones that you're going to be working with when you're sculpting. Today I'm going to be working with acrylic. I'm going to show you how to do the same thing with gel, but I really want to get into the details so that you have a really good understanding when you're picking it up, when you're setting it down, how to move it, what sides of the brush you're going to be working with when you're actually pressing, putting pressure. Let's get into those details and show you right now. One of the things that I really, and again, it doesn't matter whether you're working with, 8, 9, 10, 12, you have to remember that, or a round or a flat brush, a round or actually an oval brush. The construction of your brush, especially the ones that we work with, they're crimped at the end. So the advantage of that is that when you spin it, you're going to be able to get it to a really, really nice tight point. It's going to get quite round. The zones I'm talking about are zone 1. Let me go ahead and break this down for you, but you're going to have basically zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, right? So again, zone 1, if I flatten this out, let me go ahead and flatten this out, you're going to notice again, zone 1, which is the little darker end, zone 2, zone 3, and then you have the same thing on the sides of the brush. You're going to have zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3. Right? You want to be able to break this down because you're going to be using all of these areas. You're going to be using this area, this area, this area, right, as well as the very, very edge, right, and then sometimes the very, very front of the brush when you're actually moving. So when you're picking up acrylic, you're going to be picking up with zone 1, which is going to be, again, the very, very front of the brush, right? You're not going to be picking up with the side of the brush. You're going to be picking up with the very tip, right, the front. So you'll notice that if I submerge my brush, right, and how do I know that? Well, look, if the brush if it's pinched, right, that's going to be the side. So you know you're either working from the top or bottom if it's in that state. So if I submerge it, right, I'm going to be using one side, right? You can see how I'm picking it up with that zone, right? I'm not using more than that area. And you can see that the bead is quite angled, right? And the reason why it's angled is because I'm coming in at an angle. I'm not picking it up flat like this, or I'm not stabbing it like this. What I'm doing is I'm using that zone to grab a healthy amount, right, of product on one side of my brush. And when I'm sculpting, I like to hold it like this. That way it doesn't fall off. If I had a lot of liquid on my brush, right, if I had a lot of liquid on my brush and I just kind of picked it up and then I held it like this, the problem is you can see it like start to drip, right? We don't want that. With the same amount of liquid, if I pick that up and I turn my brush upside down, everything is going to go even. And it's not going to slide off the brush. And again, you have plenty of time. You notice that I didn't even drain anything. And then if I go ahead and set this down, it's going to release extremely well without running all over the place. And that's what we want to accomplish, right? So I'm just going to kind of pick this off before it dries. For those of you guys that are starting, I don't recommend you picking it off because it's just going to get jammed inside your brush. I would use a wipe, right? Something like this, right? And some swipe to go ahead and clean the residue off the surface so that you don't, again, clog your brush. Okay, so when we're sculpting our free edge, right, when we're sculpting our free edge. All right, so I'm not going to get into the details about prep, but I want you to understand that, if we're building a tip, right, we are going to be working with, right, I'm going to be picking up with this side here, but when I start to press it down, I'm going to be pressing literally between zone 2 and 3, right? It's almost the center to the very, very bottom of the brush. And then as I basically slide it even with the growth channel, again, I'm going to be using the side of the brush to do that. So you'll notice, and I'll call it out as I'm doing this, right? So if I pick up a pearl, if I go ahead and pick up a nice bead, the consistency that I want is quite clay-like. So I'm going to take off the excess liquid. I would do that if I'm sculpting tips. And then that way you'll notice there's no acrylic, right? And then when I go ahead and set this down, it stays stable. Now, notice the part of the brush. I'm going to be using almost the center, and then I use the side. And then again, as I'm walking up to the top, I start to get lower, right? I start to get lower on the body. So here, if I slide it up, I start to use the center of the brush side. And then as I start to work all the way up, I start getting lower on the body, right, towards the ferrule. And then once it's connected, then it's a matter of using the whole entire body of the brush. I'll usually remove all that excess, right? But the side of the brush to shape, right? And then the body of the brush, which is always going to be from the center towards the base, to kind of maneuver it and get it into the position that I want, right? So, it's really important to understand that I'm not using this part of the brush. I'm not using the tip, right? So if I took this off, right, let me go ahead and remove this and reapply another form to the free edge. Let me go ahead and do that. Okay. So you'll notice that if, for those of you guys that are beginning, if I was to pick up a bead and I went ahead and I drained out the excess liquid, and then I went ahead and I set this here, right? If I was to use the tip, right, the problem is it's very difficult for me. It's so, the pressure that you have to put, it's more of a stabbing pressure. Yes, you can do it, but it's not going to make the free edge even. You can see that I have a level of bulkiness through the whole entire thing, where if I was going to be using the body of the brush, you're going to immediately see a flattening of the acrylic. You can see how the acrylic will flatten out to an even, right, shape. You can see that I'm using the side of the brush, but really using that body, right, to be able to put pressure. And it does not matter. You can see that if I need to straighten up the very, very tip, I'm using zone 3 of the side. I'm not using the front end. I'm using this part of the brush, the very, very base of the brush, to kind of slide it, because this is the area where it's tight, it's firm. It's going to allow me to get in and really put a lot of pressure. For those of you guys that are starting, you're not putting pressure here on the front. This is the only time you're using this part of the brush right here, is when you're physically picking it up, right? So if I took my bead and I'm bouncing, that's the area that I'm going to be picking up with, right? And you'll notice, right, the only time that I'm actually going to be working with this end of the brush right here is when I'm working around the cuticle area. All right, so like if I was doing cuticle work, right, and I bounce, and I count 1, 2, 3, 4, and at a 5 count, I go ahead and set this down with the right consistency. It's movable. It's basically self-leveling enough where if I took the tip of the brush and I just touched around the side, I'm going to be able to press in a really, really tight cuticle. And then again, the only time I'm using the tip is when I need to feather, right, with a light pressure because it's soft. So if I need to come in and kind of feather that corner in and then feather through the front of the bead and then down through, I want to be able to use the part of the brush that has the softest pressure. And that's going to be this area. I'm not going to be brushing with the center or the base of the brush. I'm going to be doing.
If you guys have any questions?
Excuse me, right here.
I hope this does, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks for tuning in. Love you
you'll
guys.
notice that if I had to add excuse me, a blending bead, let me grab it some water. Just choked on myself. Apologize. You'll notice that if I go ahead and take, again, that nice fluffy bead, right? I need a consistency that's going to be clay-like because I'm adding it on top of acrylic, right? So you'll notice if I'm adding it to this point, right? And look at this. If I'm brushing it through, the softest point obviously is going to be the tip. Now for me to get it even, I'm going to be using, again, the center and the base. You can see from the side as I start to move the product down towards the tip, right? I'm using the very, very bottom, the very base, zone 3, right, of the brush in order for me to get it down and into place, right? In order for me to be able to create that even structure. Then if I need to brush it smooth, obviously I'm using a lot of the tip because that's the softest and that's the point that's not going to put indentations all the way through. So you have to understand, picking up, you're going to be picking up with the very, very front. You're not going to be picking up at the side. I don't do this. You'll never see me pick up my acrylic and then go to the side. Like, you see that? That's at the side. I don't pick it up like this. You'll never see me take my brush and just kind of stab at it where I have it literally around the whole entire tip. What I'm doing is I'm using zone 1 of my brush, right? If I submerge, no matter how much liquid I have, I'm able to focus and concentrate on just that zone so that when I'm actually bouncing in the powder, I'm able to get a fluffy pearl every single time, right? And again, right, setting it down obviously is going to self-level fast, but you'll notice, look, if I was just going to set this down to the surface, I'm not trying to build anything. I just want to be able to show you guys something. If I set this down and I wipe my brush, a lot of times, right, I'm using like you can see the areas. If I was going to be pressing this into shape, you can see that the area of my brush that I'm actually really focusing on is almost dead center, right? Even closer to the very, very base of the brush, sorry, as I move this around, right? But body-wise, if I want to get this even, right, you can see the areas that I'm trying to be able to press. I'm using the sides of the base, the body. It's really around almost the center of the brush, right, where you're using a lot of pressure towards the very, very bottom when you're working, okay? This is going to help all of you guys who are starting out, who, again, are struggling. And again, you have to remember, it's all about balance, right? You can see I'm holding my brush. I have it inside the crease of my hand when I'm working. I don't hold my brush like this when I work. I don't hold it up like this. I have it in the crease so that when I'm holding my customer's fingers, my pinky is on my hand and I'm actually able to work so that I don't shake. These are the fundamentals, and these are the things that you're going to have to worry about. These are the things that you're going to have to work on to strengthen your hand muscles, get you used to balance so that you don't shake while you work, and control the acrylic in the most uncontrollable state, right? And that's the key, right? And once you understand pressure, when acrylic is really, really wet, you don't need a lot of pressure. When it's starting to dry, you have to apply pressure in order to get it. When you're working around the cuticle area, you want it to be self-leveling. You want it to be able to level where all you have to do is touch around the cuticle area so that it creates perfection around the perimeter of the nail without you having to do that much work. When you're filling in space and adding, you can work with a clay-like consistency so that when you're using the body of the brush, right, you're going to be able to force it into perfection with a lot of pressure, okay? I hope this helps. If you guys have any questions, hit me up. I'm always here to help. Really appreciate all of you guys. Look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks a million. Have a great day. Peace.